Well, welcome everybody to LitRPG Audiobook Podcast. My name is Ray, and I will be reviewing some current classic and LitRPG audiobooks for you. Now, before I begin, I do want to apologize. You can see I'm kind of raw dogging it here. I don't have time, literally no time, to put up all my green screen stuff and make it look nice and pretty for y'all today. I have been running for the last week like a madman with work and everything else. I just have not had a moment to get this done. I have struggled. In fact, I was thinking today was Wednesday. It is Friday. So I thought I had more time. I was thinking, I'm only a day behind on getting this out because I had recorded shows way in advance, and those got burned up because of my busy schedule. So sorry. I'm going to try really hard to get things done ahead of time from now on. I've got a lot of books I've listened to. Today I'm just going to I hate to do this, I'm going to short you by just a few books. I usually have like something at the end. I give you 3 or 4, audiobooks and then give you, hey, there's Game Worlds or what else have they done? Or is it lit? And I can't do that. I just don't have the time to do that this week. So sorry. I deeply apologize. So, like I say, I should have things more caught up next week. I might have a little time to do some extra recordings ahead and get things done. So, just bear with me for a little bit. The first book, since I will do this now, technically it's not going to be a book. It's going to be a short story. The first thing I'm going to review for you is going to be Dead Must Die, a novella of the Realms, which is from the Realms, the Master of Dungeon Book 1, a humorous GameLit adventure by C.M. Carney. I love his Realms books, so I couldn't wait to get into this. It is narrated by Reuben Corbett with a book length of 1 hour and 56 minutes.
Simon stared at the Barrow King's throne for several long minutes as the conflicting feelings of anger and pride battled within him. It was a chair made from fused bones, which seemed perfect for an undead sorcerer whose real body had died millennia ago. But Simon wasn't sure it was him. Of course, these days, he wasn't sure what him was. Was he the eons dead boy who'd been tortured and murdered? Was he the eternal spirit in the shape of that boy who'd been an enslaved butler to the Barrow King? Was he the newly minted master of the Barrow? Was he all of those things? None of them? He would have frowned if he'd had lips, or muscles, or any flesh at all. But he did not. Simon was undead, and all he had for a body was a cruddy old skull with several missing teeth. Some part of him that wasn't him dredged up the term redneck. The word was foreign, otherworldly, and he wasn't sure how he understood the word, or why it made him feel so bad about himself.
So, with full disclosure, as I just said a little bit ago, I'm a really big fan of Carney's Realms books. I really, really enjoy it. I love the Arboleth as characters. I think that he really takes the old D&D stuff, like the Aboleths and the Mind Flayers, and mixes it around enough to make it something new and different, and gives us these really, really cool villains for the Realms that, his heroes have to face off against, and it really has kind of come together, especially with the last novel. I think his book 2 was fantastic. It really built on the world in book 1. And this short story, which I know he's going to kind of deviate, and it does kind of drive me a little crazy when authors will deviate from, okay, here's my series, and here's the main character, and then, okay, now here's what we're going to do. For book 3, I'm not going to have anything to do with the main character. I'm going to set on this other character who I haven't touched since book 1, which is kind of what he's going to do in the next novel, I do believe. But I'm going to have faith that he's going to handle that really well. I think he has a good plan set up, and I think that everything will come together as it should. It's kind of like sifting for gold, and he's got a lot of gold in that pan when it's all said and done with. So here, this was just kind of, I think, a tentative step for him to see what he could do if he could just put out a couple short stories. I think this was a really good idea, and I really appreciate now that authors like Dakota Kraut and even Blaise Corvin are considering doing anthologies of their game worlds, their LitRPG worlds, and opening it up for other people to submit. I think that's smart, and it's wise, and it gives back to the community in ways that you don't see very often. And it's the same thing here with short stories. I'm a huge short story fan. I've got a few books that I'll have, stuff that I've written in, like in horror novels, because I'm a big horror buff, coming out really soon. So I'm in a few anthologies for scary stuff or monster stuff. And I always like to see more shorts coming from like LitRPG. There's just a few things I really want to see more of, and I would love to see some Asian LitRPG, something along those lines, something from China, Japan, or Korea, and get a feel for that. Like, I know they have one, like I was a cave shrew, or I was a mountain crab, or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember the name of the book. But as my understanding is, it's an Asian story that has LitRPG elements to it, and I really want to get that in the audio. So I'm hoping that happens. And again, my memory I don't have time to remember all this stuff. So I struggle with that. But Carney gives me, very happily, a short story set in the realms. So, like I say, it's a no-brainer that I'm going to review this as soon as I can, because why it's short, I can listen to it in a quick amount of time, even though I do nothing but listen to audiobooks all day. Like my son literally the other day said, so I know you were listening to this audiobook, and I said, how do you know I was doing that when this happened? He said, because you're always listening to an audiobook. So I said, well, you got me. I am. I'm always listening to audio. There's just no way I'm going to miss this kind of a story. Short stories are perfect for me. So my issue comes in is that the short story centers on my least favorite character from the Realm series, the boy Simon, who kind of ends up inheriting the mantle of the dungeon that the Lich King had been running in the first book. So even though this was about probably my least favorite character, I still put my unbiased earbuds in and gave it a listen. So first and foremost, I have to say that as much as I like Carney, I say this again, I love Carney, I love his stories. His attempts at humor kind of fell short with me. I just don't know if the jokes were easy to see coming, or if it was Corbett. He didn't translate those well enough from the page to my ears as it could have. I don't know. Either way, the humor kind of took it down a little bit for me the longer the book went on. I think this would have been a really solid, just tell it like it is story, and not try to interject the funny stuff in there. It would have worked so much better just on that level, because even though there are humorous elements at some points throughout the Realms books that we've had on audio so far, and I haven't gotten to anything beyond book 2 because they're only on audio up to that point, they're not a laugh-a-minute riot kind of thing. They have nice little nuggets here or there. This was kind of like ba-dum-bump, psh, ba-dum-bump, psh, and instead of the psh, it was ba-dum-bump, whoop, whoop, uh-oh, and I hate to sound like that, but I grew up watching comedy, as a kid. I listened to 1,000 comedy albums. I grew up watching Evening at the Improv. I stayed up late to watch that as a kid. I don't have what I would call, I don't have the ability to be a comedian, but I know comedy well enough to know what works. And to me, this kind of zipped it just a bit. So I think if he cut that out, just cut that free, the story would have been a lot nicer, a lot flowier. It would have worked better, but it didn't distract or detract for me to such an event, or I should say extent, that I had to say, I can't read this. I can't listen to it. I mean, it was just one of those things where it was like listening to a friend of mine telling me bad jokes the whole time as he was telling this really great story. So, I could deal with it. On the upside, it almost becomes a dungeon core story. It had a lot of the elements, but never, most wisely, tried to become a dungeon core tale. It stayed in its nice little own kind of separate box on the shelf, with Simon kind of mucking around with the dungeon and manipulating its inhabitants, but it never became a full-on core book. And again, it's because Simon is not a dungeon core. There is an aspect of the dungeon that is self-aware, it's sentient, it's sapient. It goes through a lot to get him to kind of join with it. And whether he does or doesn't is irrelevant. It worked on a different level than I'm a dungeon core. I'm going to build this dungeon up. I'm going to do this or that. It was just kind of like Simon has control of the dungeon, just like the Lich did, because, he kind of just did, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add this stuff here so that, this can happen, or I can do this over here. He did all those things. And it's the same thing Simon does. He has control of the dungeon, but he's not spending time to build things up as much as he could have. So, it worked out really nicely. I did enjoy the story when it wasn't trying really hard to make me laugh. I think that a straight story would have worked a lot better, as I said, much more in the vein of the other Realms books, but not in the rapid-fire, unrelenting way that this kind of came out to me, but more spaced out. Just a few jokes here or there. And the ending, I actually, for the guy that's kind of going against Simon at the end, I thought exactly what Simon thinks at the end as a shock the moment the guy kind of came into being. It wasn't all that amazing to me. I said, that's a revelation I had, and I would have said the same exact thing, but I would have probably said it about an hour earlier. So, the story is good, but it isn't as clever, I think, as his other full-blown stuff. The story is fast-paced. It keeps you interested. And like I said, Simon is a character I could take or leave. I found myself liking him more as the story went on. I was even glad to see that he kind of started dating. Now, I know the narrator, Reuben Corbett, from another series that I read a few years back. It was called Dragonia, The Rise of the Wyverns. He did a really decent job there, and he does the same thing with this deal. The problem is I've only got one other person to compare him to, and that's Armin Taylor. So no matter what, Taylor narrates the other Realms books, and I have to say, when you compare apples to oranges, it never comes out fairly. So I try not to do that as often as I can. I shouldn't do it at all, but I probably do it subconsciously. I've got that unconscious bias there. But I think Corbett did a really good job with this. The longer I listened, at first I was kind of like, well, he's not Taylor. But he did get in there and he worked it really well, and it fit really well for what he was doing. He does all the necessary voices and keeps the story very fun. So, he was a good narrator and a good choice. If you don't have Taylor available or you want to kind of just keep it toned down a little bit, I think he worked really well here. So he was a good fit for the series. I would happily listen to another short story from the series. I just ask if the humor is kind of not as pervasive as it was this time around. I enjoyed it. I think it had a good plot. It did have a little plot hole, like I said. For the guy that kind of rips through the dungeon as he's going, I knew exactly what I would have done way before Simon ever came up with it. And I don't know if it's because Simon just figured it out as he realized who the guy was or whatever, but it was something, as soon as it happened, I said, well, if you just do this, it's all over with. But I'm still going to say it was a pretty slick story, so 7.9 stars. So, the next book that I'm going to be reviewing is called The Fabled Islands, a LitRPG adventure by Cameron Milan, narrated by Steve Campbell, with a book length of 8 hours and 19 minutes.
I ran out of my room and entered the kitchen. Aha! On the table was a rune. I rushed up to the table and activated the rune. The mana which formed the rune collapsed and formed words in the air above the table. I quickly read the message, growing more and more excited as I did. Dear Tristan, something important has come up, something I couldn't ignore. We haven't finished your training, but I'm still confident in you. You're on your own, punk. I'm writing this message instead of saying goodbye in person because I hate goodbyes. Too sappy. Although, as long as you walk your own road, we'll meet again eventually. As for when, that's up to you. The Fabled Islands are enormous and filled with danger, so take your time. Don't rush it. Now, time for some rules. Number 1, never tell people my name. Just say that you were raised by your grandpa and that he passed away. Number 2, never show off your full power. Number 3, be cautious of humans. Number 4, don't tell anybody my name.
Well, here we go again. Yet another Cameron Milan story, or as I've been calling him, Cameron Milan, as in, I'm too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan. Does that work? I don't think so. New York and Japan, so Milan. I'm too sexy for Milan. Yeah, either way, that's how I was kind of talking to Cameron Milan, but it's Milan. Milan. Cameron Milan. I don't know why I do that. Anyway, I've reviewed a few of his books, such as Desire and Zombie Slayer, and I probably have to say that this is my favorite of all of his series so far. I don't want to say that's a lot, because you may recall, Zombie Slayer I had a few issues with, Desire I had a few issues with, and basically it's just about Mylan tends to create very, very, well, the way I would word it is he creates extremely OP characters, like very overpowered people. And sometimes his dialogue is a little cartoonish. Coupling those things together, with like a weak narrator, which is, I think, had been his biggest downfall from day one, is weak narration for his stories. I wasn't a big fan. I really wasn't. The fact is, I was pretty much done with his Desire series. And I said, well, I got to get the zombie series because I'm a zombie guy. I'm into horror. I really like horror. So here I go. I'm going to get this book and I'm going to enjoy the horror book. And again, it was the OP character and, I'm a loner and just very... There it is. And I know people like his stuff. I do. I know people really enjoy it, and it's just not my flavor of things. And I try, whenever I listen to somebody's story, I'll say, okay, let's just, for example, if I said horror is not my bag, baby. If horror is not my bag, I'm going to read the story, listen to it, and say, you know what, I don't enjoy horror, but this horror story was really good. It had a lot of aspects that I can respect. And so I kept going back in my head and saying, should I review more of Milan's stuff just because I don't enjoy the way he creates his characters? Because I know there are characters out there that really, not characters. Oh my gosh. There are readers out there that really, really enjoy his characters. And they have a lot of fun with the OP aspects of things. And again, I think for me, the biggest problem I have aside from the OP is sometimes his dialogue is very cartoonish. It would be something I would expect to see like on a Thundar the Barbarian or an old Justice League cartoon. And I don't mean like the animated Justice League. I'm talking like Super Friends. That's how it feels to me sometimes. It's just really made for kids more than it is for adults. And this really is why I think I enjoyed this book more than I did the others. Because this has more of a young adult book feel to it. And I don't know if this is a young adult book. I don't know if it's a YA title for certain, but dang if it doesn't feel like it. It really, really does. I think the overpowered characters work well in this setting. And I think he does YA way better than the full-blown hardcore stuff. As does his character's speech patterns, i.e. like when the main character, Tristan, says, I'm going to go beat him up and take his card. Well, that would have been something like one of the characters in Desire would say, and it wouldn't have worked there as well because he was trying to be like really serious and sincere. Here, with a young man who, if it is a young adult title, it works so much better. And I don't know why this worked for me, but it did. His characters, the setting, the gameplay, it all fit into the young adult mold pretty well. And I believe this might be a good way to break in younger audiences to the GameLit or LitRPG stuff with this kind of storyline. Because it is fun. It was silly. One thing that I really liked about the game was the system that the game used, or the book used for the game, because it's not really a game. I should reiterate this. They are in a world that uses a game-style system to live. Different islands have different things that they do, so on and so forth. And what happens here is you defeat an enemy and they provide a card. And the card does, a few things. It might boost your attributes. It might provide a power increase to your magic, or grant you a special ability such as water walking or so on. Or might do, a combination of any of those things. And I really liked that a lot. I was like, I've not seen this yet in LitRPG. Now, great, I have not read nearly as many LitRPG books as, say, Ramon Mija, because the guy does nothing but sit down and read like 10 books a week. I can't do that because if a book is 24 hours, I have to take a literal 24 hours to listen to the book. I don't speed them up and I don't skip through stuff. So, I have to put in the exact amount of time where I could read, like if I literally could physically read the books, I could read about 100 pages an hour at a slow pace and retain everything. So reading for me is much faster than listening. So Ramon can pull off doing 10 books a week, and I totally get it. I understand it, and I know how he does it. Here, I don't have that magical ability. I've got to chunk in whatever I can. And granted, I listen to them like nonstop all day long. Any chance I get, I listen. But I don't have that volume of books that he has in his head. So there may be other books out there that have that, card use system, but I haven't seen it yet. So it's just one of those things that I enjoyed a lot. I think it was pretty cool that there were secret cards you could find or earn. And so, the characters were always on the hunt for more cards to power up. Also, each island provided different things. Like they come from, I forget now, it was called Bounty Island or Bountiful Island, where food was plentiful and things and so on and so forth. And at the end, they're heading off to a place called Treasure Island. I wonder what will be there. So if Bountiful Island has plenty of food supplies, like endless food supplies, they never go hungry. Treasure Island, I'm thinking they get some dough. They get some really good stuff. The story starts off with the main character, a young lad named Tristan, getting ready to defeat his last dungeon on Bountiful Island so that he can go on to bigger and better things, i.e. go on to the next island. On the way, he runs into a girl who's just been in the fight with one of the last, not last, but it's a big cat that's a boss, and she kind of gets beat up a little bit, and he helps her out, and they end up becoming friends. So, he's trained his whole life to become what's called a brave, but he's really just like a jack of all trades kind of character. He just kind of takes everything he can. He just, give me that ability, give me that skill. And so, he isn't specialized. The girl, she has a specialization in mind of what she wants to do with herself. So she kind of follows, there's like a group of 7 heroes. She has her favorite hero that she follows, and she models herself after that person. Tristan, not so much. He just kind of says, man, if there's a cool skill or an ability, I want it. Let me go get it. Score. I win. And so that's kind of how he does this. Now, my problems, here it is. He befriends the girl, and the book basically is just a pair of them wandering around doing things. So that's a slice of life. And I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of slice of life. If a slice of life does and entrance me, it's because of the characters, the story, but just an everyday slice of life stuff, I'm not impressed with most of the time. And here, that's basically it. So if you like slice of life, you'll be able to follow them around and be quite happy, because it's just them going around fighting, grinding, leveling, and doing just that sort of stuff. But the other problems I have is it just seems like with Milan, his characters are always OP and are never in any kind of danger. There's literally one scene where Tristan has his arm cut off, and he's like, oh, wow, man, that was a really cool move when you cut my arm off. How did you do that? What skill did you use? What ability did you employ to do that? Because, I'm going to beat you. And so after I do that, I want to get that power myself. How do I do that? Where does that come from? And it was just really, it just did not feel natural or organic. It was really strange how that played out. But it's just a very good thumbnail. Put that right in the wall to show that, how overpowered he is, because in spite of the fact that he's almost completely dead, he's got his arm cut off, he already knows he's going to win this battle no matter what. And of course, just like before, and if you ever read Desire Book 2, there's this orc that's just like Superman on steroids. And if they beat him one way, all of a sudden he explodes, and there's a new him, and he's got more powers that they didn't expect to have happen. And it's the same thing here. When this happens, well, guess what? I've been holding all this in reserve up until this very last moment. So, does he say, I just lost my arm, I'm going to die? He says, oh no, by the way, here is this really cool power that I didn't really want to use because it feels like cheating, but I'm going to use it now so I can beat you and win. And stuff like that takes me right out. And I think his books would be a lot better most of the time if he toned his characters down, because really, that's the biggest problem I have is, there is no danger. There's no way they're going to lose. They're too strong no matter what it is. Even when they're weak and feeble characters, they're still stronger than most of the other people around them. And he kind of gets away with that because he says that Tristan's been training his whole life. He's had his grandfather, who I don't believe was his grandfather, training him and preparing him to become an adventurer, to become this awesome brave. And that is kind of, how he kind of gets around saying, well, this guy didn't just start off overpowered. He's been training his whole life, and that's why the girl is so much weaker. Okay, I get it. But she catches up to him pretty damn quick in terms of abilities after they get going. So I don't know if his whole life has been wasted and he hasn't really trained as hard as he should have, or it just doesn't make sense to me. There's some things I didn't follow as well as I should have. But again, as a young adult book, I think it would be I could totally see I'll say this, there's maybe one or two parts that I wouldn't say, I would let my 8-year-old listen to, maybe not even my 13-year-old, because there is this scene in the book, where they see these two dwarves getting it on, and they don't walk away and be like, oh, we just saw these dwarves getting it on. They continue, he's like, hey, come check it out. There's these two people in here, and they're doing it. They're doing it. Come see. As a young adult book, this would work pretty well. I think that the stuff that he does works really well as a young adult book. And then he throws stuff like the sex scene in there. And I'm like, where the hell did that come from? It was really completely irrelevant to the story. It was unnecessary. They could have done 1,000 other things to piss off the dwarves, and it would have worked way better. But he had to toss that in. So that's where I say it feels like a young adult book. It looks like a young adult book. But there are times where you're like, nope, this is not a young adult book. And I think that would be my biggest issue right there. Because there's no way I could let my 8-year-old listen to this book. Because as soon as he said, wow, what does that mean they were doing? Okay, we'll just stop right there because your mother's going to kill me now. I have got my funeral plans laid out. They're over here. So, I can't do that. I can't let my 8-year-old or my 9-year-old or even my 13-year-old, because my wife would still kill me. Even though it's something I could care less about a lot of times. I know that there are people out there who would be like, my 13-year-old is reading about sex. Even if it's about mythical dwarves having sex, I'm not happy with it. I can understand that. So this has this really good YA vibe throughout most of the book, even with a couple of the limbs getting decapitated. You don't decapitate limbs, Ray. Don't be stupid. With some of the limbs being eviscerated. Nope. See, I need to get my research tool out and think about it. So let me just see. Dismemberments. There are a lot of dismemberments in the book. Yes. So, even though there are things where people's arms are dismembered, that I have no problem with. But the sex stuff, it was just kind of weird and wonky, and it didn't fit. And I don't know. So I can't give you it's a guaranteed, this is for young people kind of thing, even though I would say it is otherwise. But anyway, I have to say, probably the best part about this book is that Mylan has finally found a narrator who can do his stories justice. Steve Campbell is probably the reason that I enjoyed this story as much as I did. He makes wonky dialogue come off as normal and keeps the listener on the hook. I mean, like this. Like I said, with Zombie Slayer, the narration was weak and it just could not support the story. Campbell keeps the story going. Sorry, I had to hook in my mouth still. Campbell keeps the story going where it might have petered out, or, if he wasn't here, you know what I mean? If he wasn't here doing it and somebody else was, the story would have just been, it'd have been a sheet of paper. It'd have been that flat, in my opinion. I think that he bolstered the story. He kept the tale going. And again, he made it more fun than I've ever had in the Mylan book, up until this point. Cameron Mylan, again, is one of those people that the way he writes, it's not my flavor. It's not like I want on my plate to eat dinner most of the time. But this book, Campbell saved me from losing my mind. So silly as it was, or as odd as it came out in some spots, I think he kept it pretty nice and level. And I'm going to call it a 7.4. And originally I was going to do 7.1, but I still think this would be a good book for younger people to get into, even if they're 14. I think it's a good way to get into it. But I mean, I know when I was 14, I was reading Tolstoy. So, I don't think you got to dumb down stuff for kids. But I still think that, if they're watching anime, this is right up their alley, because to me, everything he writes is it comes right off of Dragon Ball Z, attitude-wise. Well, if Goku can do this, then, Piccolo is going to do that. There's a lot of stuff that makes me feel like these characters are also overpowered, and it's because he's just taking Dragon Ball Z stuff and putting them into other situations. So here, he kind of knocks it down to a much more manageable level. Yeah, they're still overpowered, but it's nowhere near like it was in the other novels. And like I said, Campbell kind of comes in with his cape and he rescues Lois Lane as she falls from the helicopter, because only, the cape can do that. And here, the Lois Lane is the story. He keeps it from going splat when it could have. I think it could have very, very easily, had somebody else done this, it would have just went and it had been done. So, kudos to Campbell for doing that. I know it's not easy. It had to be hard. It had to be mind-rending in some spots. So 7.4 stars. This is a real step up from his other stories. And it is one I would happily let other people know about. With Desire, I kind of said, I wouldn't recommend this. And then Zombie Slayer, I said, it has definite feel like skeletons and things like that. Another novel I've read a long time ago. And I think that it could work if he toned some stuff down or toned the character back. I probably wouldn't have recommended it either for my close friends. This one I could say, if you want a silly, light little story, here you go. Let your kids go out and enjoy it. Just don't give it to anybody below the age of 12, because there is a big it's not a big sex scene. They're not talking about like dwarven dorks doing stuff. There's no dwarven penetration, but thank God for that. I'm sorry I just gave you that image. But, it's still there, and it's very obvious what they're doing. So if you're okay talking to your kids about it, let them listen to it. But 7.4 stars, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Okay, folks, take 5. This is like the 5th time I've tried to record this. Every time I try to record, I get a phone call or something happens. I'm struggling really, really hard to make this happen. So I'm going to just say it right now. I'm really pumped up because I get to finally do another sound booth spotlight. Yay! Why I haven't done them this much, and I probably said this 5 times already, so I'm going to just say it. I don't know. Well, I do know. I know I don't do them as much as I can because mostly Sound Booth puts out like 15-hour books, 20-hour books. Like if you look at Life Reset or Unbound Deathlord or any of those things, they're not like 8-hour books. They're big books, and I can only get so many books fit into a week. And I've got a backlog of books that I'm trying to get through, to be fair, so maybe I can sneak in a short story if they're short stories and they're really short. I'll get those in ahead of time because I can listen to that in the interim of something else happening. But Sound Booth, they don't go small. They always go big, really big. So I try to get them in as much as I can. Today, I'm going to get to review Dragon Seed. I have been dying to listen to this book since I first saw that SBT was doing it. Dragon Seed, Archemi Online, written by James Osiris Baldwin, narrated by Justin Thomas James, Jeff Hayes, and Lori Catherine Winkle, with a book length of 12 hours and 38 minutes.
There was a sound like a set of massive studio lights turning off, and the room went dark. For several seconds there was nothing. But then a haunting song sung by several voices broke through the darkness. A hypnotic, multi-layered chant in a language I didn't understand. Until I did. They were singing in Tunhar, the native language of my character. And with the song came memories. The taste of thin, soured milk flavored with a sweet floral syrup, like smooth yogurt. The feel of the wind on my face. The sight of a million birds migrating through a mountain pass. And weirdly, a memory of hiking along a trail and coming up over a bare bluff of stone that was covered in giant metallic red flies the size of small dogs. They weren't monsters. They were something important to the tune. Something I still didn't know the full significance of. They weren't my memories, but they could have been.
This is my much beloved and deeply missed Sound Booth Spotlight. So I'll do more in the future, I promise. But I have to say, I've been just bursting to get to Dragon Seed. Dragon Seed is an excellent book that I enjoyed right from the start. Well, maybe not right from the start. I'll be honest with you. There's about 10% of the book that is a lot of build-up. And you know me, I always say, get into the game as soon as you can. And I understand the build-up was necessary. But the build-up kind of felt like it was a mashup of like Will Marsh's Dark Elf series and James Hunter's Viridian Gate Online. Only because it starts off with like this world-ending sort of apocalypse. Here they have this virus called the Hex virus, and it's killing everybody. I mean, everybody. You know, you get it, you got 4 days to live, and, you know, there's no getting around, there's no cure. So when you think of like apocalypse, the first name in apocalyptic, you know, LitRPG you go to is James Hunter. Right after that comes up Dave Wilmorth with his Dark Elf series, The Land of the Undying, because both of those have like something really horrible that's happening, and both times we have the people turning to video games in order to survive, whether it's to stay sane and maybe actually put your brain into the game later, or just to put yourself into the game and survive some way, in some form. So that's it. And that's the same thing here. This Hex virus is ganking everybody it comes in contact with, and the only way that you're going to get a chance to continue on in some form is to download your brain into this new video game that the main character's brother just happens to kind of have some sort of pool in. So here's what happens. The MC, Hector Park, gets the Hex virus. By the way, I love the Hex virus. That's a cool name for it. I think like the only other viral thing that kills everybody that really just amazed me there was an old RPG called All Flesh Must Be Eaten. I'm a zombie fan. And they would give you different scenarios. And one of the greatest scenarios ever was the AIDS virus was you know, pretty popular back in the day for like scaring people. And so what they had was there was a guy whose girlfriend had AIDS, and she died, and he went to a voodoo queen, had her resurrected, and he had sex with her, but of course, she was infected with AIDS, so, he ended up getting a variant of AIDS, which was called Fade, because you slowly faded away until you came back as an undead, and, you know, so everybody who he had sex with, because he suddenly had like this unchecked libido, he went out and have sex, and they would get it, and then once they had sex with would get it, and so on and so forth. And so the Fade virus was like my favorite RPG virus of all time until Hex. Hex has this really nice ring to it. I like the connotations and the fact that you die really quickly. So, you know, here we go. We got a really good premise right off the bat, but it takes a little while for him to get going because Hector has Hex. Hex has Hex, and he has to get to his brother, who he knows is also, his mother just died, so he wants to get to his brother, I guess, so he can infect him too, because he doesn't know his brother has Hex as well. So he ends up leaving quarantine, which, as everybody knows, when you have like this incredibly vicious, deadly virus, the first thing you need to do is get out and get into contact with as many people as you possibly can. You know, no one's ever seen Stephen King, the Dark Tower, you know, or The Stand, you know, because The Stand is all about that very same thing, you know, Captain Jinx, you know, all that stuff. Same thing here. So he gets out, he has no qualms about spreading this virus wherever he goes. And I don't know if that's an oversight on Baldwin's writing, but I just think that I would have liked to have seen him at least fret or be concerned a little bit that he might be spreading the virus to somebody else just somewhere along the way. Because even if everywhere he goes is contaminated already, he's still freshly contaminated. And if there's somebody who doesn't have it, they're going to get it. Just saying. Just saying. So anyway, he ends up looking for his brother. He gets there and finds out his brother is even worse than he is, and he's on the cusp of death. But his brother, as I said, has some pull with a company that he works for that has developed this really cool game system that will allow you to upload your consciousness into the game. Well, maybe, because there's no guarantee with it, especially if you have Hex. There's a curve. If you have Hex and you're at the beginning of it, you've got a pretty good shot. You got about 80% of making it inside and staying there. And the longer you go and the worse you get, the possibility of you getting into the game and being stable or anything else, it declines. I mean, you've got like there's no bell curve. There's just a big dip. So his brother and he end up going to a facility, getting hooked up into dive machines, so to speak, and Hector is the only one who kind of makes it. Maybe. I really, really have my doubts as to that being the case. I really suspect that there is way more going on than they first give you in the book. But either way, once you enter the world, it's pretty friggin' cool. And there's all kinds of stuff. They call it mage tech or magitech, or it's kind of like a melding of science and magic. There's stuff like that. The world itself is really well built. It's a deeply, deeply built world. There's just so much going on, to it. You just get all those sorts of things. So this game world has aspects that you really don't get to see very often. And that was not a facile plug for my new Game World segment. It just kind of came out that way. It really wasn't. But this game world is really cool. It's got a lot of depth that you don't get in most LitRPG books. Most just they're kind of there and they give you this, but they go into such detail with he goes through 5 races he can choose, and you get very detailed descriptions of all 5 races. And the one I think he's going to pick, he doesn't pick. Well, I said, okay, this is the one he's going to get, but the one I would have chosen was here. And then he goes and picks the one that I knew he was going to get. But you still can see there's pluses and minuses to everything. So he gets choices and he makes them very intelligently as to why he picks what he picks. And I think that one of the neater things is he decides he wants to become this dragon rider. And one of the coolest aspects of the story is that he doesn't automatically become a dragon rider. It's not like he just wakes up and he's in the dragon rider camp and he's going to be trained how to ride dragons. Nope. He wakes up, he's on a slaver ship, and he has to figure out how the hell to escape. And there's a lot more going on to it because, well, let's just be frank, there may have been an issue with his upload or something, but he is not really in the game all the way. I mean, if he dies and he doesn't know this, he's done. He's done. So he kind of has to have a couple other things happen before he can actually make his way all the way into the game and be safe and not worry about respawning. Which, of course, I'll say it's very early in the book. Of course he does that. Of course. Because if he didn't, that would be the end of the book. So that aspect of it was really neat. It was really interesting. And there's a lot of things that happen that just kind of build and build and build. And they split the book into 2 pieces. There's book 1 and book 2, or book A or book B, or book whatever. You get it. And the first book is a lot of the info dump stuff that you would get for game mechanics and things like that. And the other half of the book is more, here's him now employing those things and going out and doing these things, but with more of a mystery to it. There's something deeper going on, darker going on than what he expected as a dragon rider. So he has to become a dragon knight in order to do this. And in order to do that, he isn't automatically just given the reins of a dragon. He has to earn the right. And if he fails, he never gets that opportunity to go back and do it again, which is one of those funny things because he has to earn the right to that class. But, and here's the kicker, there's a part where they say, okay, you've got to take the knight class, K-N-I-G-H-T, not knight classes, a community college. You've got to take the knight class in order to continue on. And he doesn't do that, but if he had, because he picked something else instead of the knight, but if he had, and he failed, then he's just a knight. And I don't know how that would have worked if because can you go back and scrap yourself and say, I want to restart? They didn't say that. They didn't say that at all. So I think he'd have been really boned if he doesn't end up becoming a dragon rider, which I won't tell you at the end. He may or may not actually become a dragon rider. There may be more going on in the story than what you first believe. And I think that's one of the nicer things about it. You expect this from the story and you get this instead, the whole way through. Now, the only time I don't think that happens, well, I'll get to that. Okay. Anyway, there were some things that I really like, but the primary is is that, like I say, we don't get a definitive answer on what happens to Hector's brother. I think there's a lot more going on that we're going to find out about than what we get right here. And again, like I said, I really appreciate that he's not automatically made into a dragon rider. The only downside to the whole book that I think was there was that I kind of found it was kind of predictable as to who was going to be a baddie and stick it to Hector. I don't know. I really saw the twist of things coming from a mile away. I really did. I know I say that a lot. I don't know why I can pick up on this sort of stuff sometimes. And when I'm surprised, I'm genuinely happy I'm surprised. Here, I kind of knew who was going to do what before they ever did it. And there's not a lot of foreshadowing to that aspect of things, but I just say, based on personality, I don't trust this guy. I really don't. But then, I never trust anybody, and that's why I'm not ever surprised. I always think the worst of people, especially characters in a book. I never trust anybody's going to do the right thing. I think everybody's out for themselves, and again, here, I'm kind of proven correct. But that was like my only downside about it. Without a doubt, one of the best things was how this story was handled by Sound Booth, okay? The team really pulls out all the stops, and I don't even know what that means, that saying. Do they go to the sinks and pull out the stoppers, the plungers, to let the water out? I don't know. I think you would want to keep the stops in and let stuff build up and overflow. But anyway, what they don't hit is the sound effects button on this book, and I'm really happy with that. Like, I don't need to hear swords clanging or laser beams blasting. There's another company that does like the Marvel and DC stuff, and they do a great job. And they call it a movie in your mind. And if you've ever seen Miss Saigon, that is a fantastic song. The movie in my mind. Great song. But I don't need that. I need the story to kind of speak for itself. And I think here it really does. Because what they do, and I believe this is Justin Thomas James's doing, is they add this really wonderfully cinematic score to parts of the novel. And it's almost like what I wish he had done with The Wayward Bard. Because The Wayward Bard, to me, it felt like stock music, like the violin and things like that, which it was nice and it added to the story. But I think here, his keyboarding was really great. I think if he did it, which I do believe that JTJ, JTJ had done the music himself. I think he scored everything. He was really incredible. When the score kicked in, it added so much. It made a good battle scene feel really epic. And I really appreciated how it didn't overwhelm the spoken words. A lot of times what you get is like this music that comes in and it's blaring and it's overwhelming as the other guy speaks, and then it kind of fades away. No, this was kind of like it built up, and it kind of had a crescendo, and it leveled out for a little while, and it stayed there. But the whole time it was playing, I could hear Justin Thomas James speaking and doing his narration. It did not submerge the words. It worked really, really well. I actually felt, as I was listening to it, I said, I feel like I'm watching a scene from Braveheart, one of my favorite movies. I'm Irish, so I have to say Braveheart. But, any battle scene that you put in there that's really cool would have worked. But I was like, I feel like I'm watching Braveheart with this background music. The score itself was just well done, and I applaud the subtle way that it was used. It could have dominated everything rather than enhancing it. I just feel that the score in various parts of narrations was more of a benefit than I would have expected. Now, Justin Thomas James and Laurie Catherine Winkle, the Bonnie and Clyde of SBT, are just amazing here. And I call them that because they're the only people that get three names. Because the only people that get three names are people like John Hinckley Jr., John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald. Those kind of people. They get three names. Like, think about it. When are you called by your middle name, if you have one? It's when somebody's really pissed off at you. Like my mother would be like, Raymond Dale Johnson. Oh, crap, I've done something wrong. So, if you're using three names, you've done something, that maybe you might want to rethink. And here, I think that it's apropos to call them Bonnie and Clyde, because if you have to use three names, you're up to something. That's all I can say. And it could just be because they kind of steal your breath or they steal the story. James Osiris Baldwin, That's another guy with 3 names, the writer. They steal that right from him, and he's a 3-name guy. I don't know. I'm just saying, watch out for that guy. Watch out for this book, because Baldwin's kind of blown me away with his writing. I'm really impressed with it. Very impressed. But watch out for this book, because you got, like, the only guy that doesn't have 3 names is Jeff Hayes, who also lends his vociferous skills to this track. And he is my favorite narrator, so anything I say is going to be kind of biased, because it is, but he rocks. Party on, Jeff. Party on, man. He really, really adds, a nice spice to the story. He's a good counterpart to, Justin Thomas James. His voice is kind of James Earl Jones-like. And so, when Jeff Hayes comes in, and it's not that Darth Vader-y thing, you kind of get, like, the other side of it. It's kind of like Luke coming in against Vader. And it works really well. They play off each other so much better than you would expect, just from 2 guys goofing around. Not that they're not serious about it, but it just feels like 2 guys having fun the whole time, and that's how it should come off when I listen to a book. I should say, these people are having fun doing the narration. The story is amazing. And when those things combine, pow, you get stuff like Dragon Seed. So the long and short of it is, this is an impressive debut LitRPG novel. It's not his first book. He has a few books under his belt, Baldwin does, but I can see this is his first foray into the genre, and he hit it pretty well. My final score is an 8.3, but that's really just because there were, like, certain things that, the twists that I could see coming from way before they ever happened. And I like to be surprised. If he surprised me, it'd probably been a little bit higher, probably like an 8.5. But I think, like, the first half of the book is probably superior, even though that's the info dump part. I enjoyed that a lot more going through it than I did the second. But the second half of the book was just as interesting. It just had a different take on things. And so, as he was struggling to become the Dragon Rider, I enjoyed that a lot. So, it is what it is. 8.3 is still damn good. I enjoyed this book a lot. I know you will. And this is like a really great test book for Sound Booth to kind of add cinematic score. I don't think I'd want music or a score throughout the entire book. Like, I don't want like that going through, like, as everything's happening and, we're getting to these dramatic moments. I just think that, like, the way it kind of crept in during the battle was really cool, but I don't need, like, the background music like I'm watching a movie for the entire time. I don't need that, unless you're going to hear, like, the things, dum, 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 that score from Requiem Morone. That's incredible, and that works just so well. I don't care what you put it behind. I do that while I'm cooking dinner, and I make that hamburger, and I hear that music, and I start thinking, that's not a burger, that's a thing. But that's neither here nor there. But anyway, it was a great way for them to kind of introduce this music, because, like I say, the Wayward Bard did it, but it kind of felt like canned music. I didn't feel like they had somebody come in and play the violin specifically for that. And even if they had, the music was already, like, pre-done music. It was Turkey in the Straw or whatever it was, that they had. This was original, nice, fun, cinematic stuff, and I loved it. I think you will really enjoy this book. I cannot wait for book 2 to kind of see what happens, to find out, because I know there's more going on with his brother. There are things that happen with the NPCs. I don't even think I mentioned that, but the NPCs have these weird dreams that kind of give you a clue that there's more going on in this world than what you expect. I know what I think. You may have a different opinion on that, but I think that, this is just, no, if you don't want to know, this would be the time to stop, because I'll just stop after this anyway. But I think, spoiler, time to go. No? Okay. If you're still here, I think the NPCs are failed downloads to the game. Because there's a lot of people that tried to get in and didn't make it. They died or whatever happened. But considering that they say they all have dreams about war, and he comes from a place where war was pretty rampant, I think there's more to it than what he lets on with the NPCs. So, I really want to see that. I want to find out what's going on there. I want to find out what's going on with his brother, because I don't think his brother is really dead. I think his brother is just an NPC now that he's going to meet somewhere along the line and be like, I know this guy from somewhere. That's my impression. So, spoilers done from this point. Good luck with that. Good, find out what you can. But I think it's a good book. I think it's really enjoyable, and I know you'll love it.
Hey everybody, I'm Ramon Mejia from the LitRPG Podcast, popping into our sister podcast, the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast, where you're normally seeing Ray right here in this exact spot, giving you wonderful audiobook reviews. This week though, I'm just doing one review of one audiobook just because Ray thought there was a conflict of interest, and he's just so ethical, I couldn't say no to the guy. I'm actually going to be reviewing Viridian Gate Online Side Quest, a LitRPG anthology. I think one of the authors in that novel, in that short story collection, is Ray Johnson. So that's why he felt it was a conflict of interest. So there's actually a bunch of wonderful, amazing authors and narrators that have come together to combine their talents for this wonderful anthology collection from the Viridian Online series, of course published by Shadow Alley Press. That includes the authors of like James Hunter, J.D. Astra, D.J. Bowden, N.H. Paxton, Raymond Johnson, of course, and Nicholas Reed. Now, some of those authors have actually gone on to write their own extended universe novels for the Viridian Online series, and I'm sure the publishers, Shadow Press, have plans to give those all full audiobook treatments. They've all been doing really well. But I'm going to be essentially reviewing the stories and also the audiobook narrations. I've actually already done a ebook review of the anthology, and I'm going to be going over my thoughts for that as well, comparing the two, whether or not essentially the narration in the audiobook version either elevated or tanked these stories, which I may or may not have liked. But until then, we also have, again, it's the total audiobook length for this particular short story anthology collection is 8 hours, 47 minutes. Now, here we go. I'm actually going to be reviewing each short story individually, and that's mostly just because I don't think it's fair to judge necessarily everything all at once and like mush together my feelings about the stories that I didn't maybe like the best with the ones I really thought were amazing. So I'm just going to be reading up the name of each title and my thoughts on it, and the narrator, of course, and who wrote it. We're going to be with A Gentleman's Work by James A. Hunter, narrated by Jeff Hayes. And of course, throughout all these short stories, I should mention that even though the narrator might be one person in particular, the Sound Booth Theater cast and crew have all pitched into different points to do different voices or different characters, like small sections. So they'll be all there. This is the short story novel blurb. When an Imperial Inquisitor captures a Thieves Guild operative, Cutter must undertake a deadly rescue mission while using every gift in the book to stay one step ahead of a headman's blade. And the prize for his extraordinary quest? Nothing short of keys to Rothenheath, the Thieves Guild. Deception, subterfuge, and heavy drinking, all in a day's work for a gentleman.
A Gentleman's Work by James A. Hunter. I'm no dumb mark, and these dark alleys were more familiar to me than my officer's suite over at Darkshard. Don't recognize you, and you ain't no friend of mine.
So there you go. And I'm going to mostly be repeating my review for the story version of it, because I'm going to be breaking between these into thoughts on the story and then thoughts specifically on the narration, much like Ray does for the show. This is the longest of the short stories in the collection. It's by the guy who wrote Viridian Online, James Hunter. Comes in at about 33% page count. My review for the story section doesn't really change, just because it's an audiobook in this particular instance. It is focused on one of the main secondary characters for the series, Cutter. He's the main character in that original series, his NPC companion. And if you like thief stuff and you like that character a lot, you're really actually gonna love this story, I think. For me, in the original reading of the short story, it didn't quite work for me. But going into the narration portion of this, the narration I found personally usually adds a lot of extra flavor, and for me anyways, it's a lot easier just to kind of sit back, relax, and just enjoy the story as it comes in. I don't have to do too much analytical work or taking notes, and that's just one of the consequences of audiobooks versus ebooks. There's a lot less effort. You can just chill. And that definitely added here. Jeff Hayes pulls out his English accents for the story. I think it's a Cockney accent. I don't know. It might have varied a little bit, but I think he did a really good job with Cutter, and I think the addition of like just the voices of telling the story instead of being able to read it really added just enough flavor to push this past the 7 out of 10 mark for me, making it good. Like my original ebook version, ebook review score was 6.9. Like it was just shy. Like it was hard for me to get into the written version, but the ebook version was like the audiobook version, I should say, was much easier. It definitely gets a score of 7.2 to 10 for me. I had a good time with this particular short story as an audiobook a bit more than I did as the ebook. Okay, next one is going to be Funeral Parlor by Raymond Johnson, narrated by Jeff Hayes. And here's the little blurb. A young spiderling is stranded in an alien land, surrounded by hostile creatures. Forced to fight for her life in a bid to find her way home, she must transform into the predator she is destined to become or die alone and forgotten, trapped in a dark world known as the Shadowverse.
Funeral Parlor by Raymond Johnson.
Congratulations, Shaklak. Who are you? All you need to know about me is that I am a god.
Okay. I enjoyed the first ebook version, so I'm definitely going to enjoy the audiobook version as well. It's narrated by the wonderful narrator Jeff Hayes. The story is simple. It's nice. It's short. It's like 8% of the novel. It's told from the point of view of the monster itself. It's one of those monster RPG evolution stories. Good action, good accurate arachnid anatomy, which that was fun. And on the narration side, I actually found that I like Jeff Hayes' regular voice than I did comparing it to the last book, which was his English accent voice. While the English accent I think is a little sexier, his regular voice was actually easier to understand, and he was able to do more inflections and more tonal things with his normal voice, I think, than he does when he has to focus on doing an accent accurately, consistently, and doing a narration at the same time. So for me, I definitely like his normal reading voice a lot better, with the exception of when he does his Arnold Schwarzenegger accent. That's amazing. You should listen to some of the times he uses it for War Eternus. But this one's just regular voice. And again, it adds an extra oomph to the story. I already like this story, and this just made me like it a little bit more. I think his voice had a little more extra attention to the story that wasn't there in the ebook version, at least for me. The ebook version, I got a score of 7.3 out of 10 for me. Audiobook version gets a better score of 7.4 out of 10. Added a little extra something. Okay, on to the next short story, which is going to be Raiding of Rothenheath by J.D. Astra, narrated by Lori Catherine Winkle. Short story blurb. The Crimson Alliance has breached the walls of Rothenheath, inciting Alexio Carrero's rage. Now Abby and a ragtag invasion crew must reach the keep's command center before the defending troops mobilize and shut down the takeover. Also, they'll lose the battle in war for Elgar's freedom.
The Raiding of Rowan Heath by J.D. Astra.
Abby, move!
We came to Rowan Heath to save all the people of Eldgard from cocaine dictators like Carrera.
Okay. I didn't actually like. I didn't dislike the ebook, the regular written short story version of this. I gave it a score of 5 out of 10 initially. This one gets, as an audiobook, a score of 6 out of 10. The original written version of the story just got boring to me. I don't know why it did. It's probably because of how I was reading the story, and the story basically centers around events that have already happened that I've read about, and it's like someone else's point of view, so it wasn't really too interesting to me. But the author really kind of adds a little something extra. It doesn't add a lot to it. And I also noticed that the narrator, Lori Catherine Winkle, did pronounce some gamer terms incorrectly, which bugged me for some reason. But it's enough. It doesn't push it into like a good score, but it does push up a little bit. It gets a audiobook score of 6 out of 10, which is like, oh, this didn't work for me still, but other people I think will like it more than me. So there you go. Okay. On to the next short story review for The Ballad of Jero Edgewalker by N.H. Paxton, narrated by Justin Thomas James. Here's the blurb. Jero's an assassin and is good at it. When he finds a foe that is insurmountable by normal means and uncovers a plot to destroy everything he loves, Jero has to balance his morality with his love for her friends and make an incredibly difficult decision.
The Ballad of Jero Edgewalker by N.H. Paxton. They say he rides a dragon, a god's damn shadow dragon at that. They say he disappears in a flash, never to be heard before he smashes your skull with a huge honking mace. I heard that the door to the village tavern slammed open, and the 3 boisterous men fell silent.
So there we go. I like the ebook version of this. Audiobook version actually was better. Like, it really was. Like, I think Justin Thomas James, in the stories that he narrated for the anthology here, actually adds enough oomph and enough extra flavor and depth to the storytelling that actually elevates it to great for me. Like, this score essentially goes from 6.7 out of 10 as an ebook version to 8.0 out of 10. So an 8 out of 10 for me, which is a great score. So it goes from good to great just because of the narrator. The story itself was one of my favorites in the anthology. It was one of the best planned stories in the entire anthology. It has good original characters. The storytelling was well told, and it's tied really well into the VGO universe. The narration by Justin, he does several accents, and I'll be honest, I did not expect the Spanish Dos Equis voice for the narrator, but he was really done. It was nice. I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting, but it still works really well. And between him and Alicon and the rest of the cast, the narration was a joy to listen to. And again, it kind of bumped it up from good to great for me. It's a short story. So there you go. Here we go. Also, we have our next short story, which is going to be Buried Alive by Nicholas Reed, narrated by Lori Catherine Winkle. Here's the blurb. Carlos Vegas thinks escaping certain death by entering the virtual world of VGO, but instead he's swallowed alive by the deadly barren sands. He'll have to overcome the riddles and horrors of a long-forgotten temple in order to escape, but can he do it before the evil still there centuries ago finds him?
Buried Alive by Nicholas Reed.
I do not recall the name of your people.
Dawn Elves.
Yes, you found this sunken temple in the midst of the barren sands. You may call me Senmet. It seems Mott has seen fit to accept you.
Didn't like this source rather. I don't know why. I mean, I do know why. It's an okay story, but it felt very distant from the VGO universe in the ebook version. It felt like Viridian Online, ancient Egyptian, and it just didn't work for me. It wasn't a bad score. I gave it an original score of 6 out of 10 for the ebook version. Audiobook version is the same though. Like the narration didn't add anything, didn't take away from it though. And it's just like, oh, okay, it's just kind of like, didn't work. So there it is. So it gets a score 6 out of 10 for the audiobook version. Okay, next is the short story For a Final Kiss by DJ Bowden, narrated by Justin Thomas James. Alan Campbell, there's a blurb here. Alan Campbell was a talker, not a fighter, and until someone murdered his girl. He'd almost given up on finding the killers. Now he's got a fresh lead, a trio of mercenaries who outclass him in every way but his wits. He'll cheat, he'll bluff, and steal to get his revenge. As one of VGO's immortal travelers, he's willing to die trying.
A Final Kindness by DJ Bowden. I was drinking to Wendy's memory at a corner table in the Elegant Wolf when her killers walked through the front door, dripping with rain. No one wanted trouble, except me.
You're coming with us.
What my associate means, traveler, is that we have an opportunity for you.
Like a quest?
Like a quest.
So there we go. This was actually my favorite story of the anthology as an ebook version, and it's still my favorite story as an audiobook version. And again, I think Justin Thomas James really does a great job again, just adding some extra oomph to the story that elevates it from good to great, for me at least. The story of it was probably a little more removed from the VGO side, but I originally, or even in the original review, I mentioned that it was the most removed. But it also the least amount of game mechanics, but it had the most heart, and it cut away, it had a great backstory for characters, and that is still true for the audiobook version. You also should be aware that the narrator, again, does a good job, but this story has actually already become a full-fledged novel. The Viridian Gate publishing team, Shadow Press, actually took this author, took this story, and made it into its own series for the Viridian Online Expanded Universe. So this actually same main character has his own series now. Although that new series is set like way before even the original Viridian Online series, and this is kind of showing a much later story version of it. You can kind of see the similarities there, the lesser game mechanics in there, and also there's like the really good storytelling, and that definitely carries over into the short story as well. Justin, again, does a good job of bringing descriptions to life, and the action adventure, the Legion is Powers, all really well done. Him and the rest of the Samba Theater crew, again, just added enough, for me at least, that it made from good to great. So that's always great. That's one of the things I love about audiobooks, is that they can elevate a written work to greatness because of just like the depth of voices and emotions that they can bring to the story as they're narrating or doing the voices. So that's definitely the case here. Overall, I think the anthology is still good. I actually think the audio version of the anthology is on average better than the ebook version, and that's just because it's easier to listen to. The voices and the narrators do such a good job of bringing these characters life, of making you feel like you're there for most of the time, most of them. And I like the story. I like the anthology. On the whole, the anthology we get a score 7 out of 10, which is still a good score. But again, there are definitely some really great stories within the anthology. Like any anthology, you're going to love some. You're not going to love everything. But on the whole, I like time with this. So for me, good score again, 7 out of 10 on the whole. And I get each one of those short stories individual review scores for you to enjoy. So that's it for me. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me, and we're going to give you back to Ray.
Wait, what? That's it? That's the end of the show? Jeez, I'm shorting you guys this week. I'm really sorry, guys. Yet again, it's just been so crazy and busy. I don't have a lot of time to get this stuff recorded sometimes, and I have pushed it to the limit to get it done today for you all. But again, I would like to thank you so very much for watching. I do appreciate you all taking the time to watch or listen to the show. Like I say, as always, if you want to support us, you can like the LitRPG Podcast Facebook page or the YouTube page. Or, if you're really generous, just share and like the video. I sincerely hope you've enjoyed our show. Please leave comments or suggestions in that place down below there. And feel free to say whatever you like. I enjoy the comments. Remember, you can always follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Just, if you could, if you've read a book, leave a review. Authors really depend on reviews, and it really matters. Just say something nice. That's all we ask. For the LitRPG Audiobook Podcast, I am your humble reviewer, Ray, and I would ask if you could, please keep listening.